Good evening and welcome. My name is Hori Hadgu and I'll be moderating this webinar. We're joined by Lisa Markovitz. Lisa is a dedicated community advocate. She serves on various organizations. Currently, she is the president of the People's Voice, vice president of Howard County Citizens Association, HCCA, where I also serve as a board member, and she's also the chair of Howard County Smarter Growth Alliance. On any given year, Lisa testifies on several zoning and land use bills, demonstrating her expertise and knowledge by suggesting improvements and working closely with elected officials to address those issues. She ran for county council and was close to winning in 2014. We called this webinar MythBusters, Zoning and Land Use Edition, because for decades, Howard County zoning and land use decisions have relied on various orthodoxies. Think of all, unfortunately, I can safely say that almost all municipal governments have fallen for these orthodoxies. Think of the countless stadiums and tax increment financing schemes approved by local governments in the name of tax revenue. Howard County is, I think Howard County is more prone to such dogma because the county's zoning and land use decisions were under the stewardship of a single developer for a long time. That's James Rouse. While I would readily stipulate that Rouse's agenda as a developer were advanced under various questionable actions, a convincing argument can also be made that what his vision achieved with Columbia is the reason Howard County is one of the most sought after communities in the country. He built Columbia for profit, but not at the expense of quality of life and the people who live in it. We don't see that anymore. For at least 3 decades, developers have built taxpayer dollars to pad their profits. To advance favorable laws, they relied and continue to rely on notions and ideas that upon scrutiny are merely dogmas. As we approach the next general plan and comprehensive zoning, residents and voters should be prepared to reject these myths. The future of our county relies on it. I want to continue to reiterate that here that the webinars that this webinar and and other webinars that we've had before are not premised on opposing residential development or any development. We need to pursue responsible policies that lead to favorable conditions for all stakeholders, not just wealthy developers. Before we start the program, I want to thank our co-host organizations. Thank you to the groups and their leadership who have demonstrated a dedication to ensure that our public infrastructure is maintained and improved, and who want an equitable allocation of resources through a fiscally responsible budget. And so this webinar is being recorded. Without further ado, Lisa?
Well, thank you for asking me to join you tonight, Harry. It's a privilege and an honor to be here and a pleasure. And thank you for your civic advocacy work over the years as well. I'm going to share the screen and start a slideshow just to kind of keep me on track and talk about various points that we're interested in covering. In case people are wondering, why are we doing this? Why are we here tonight? Why are we talking about something that we've labeled myth busting. Why is there so much contention in Howard County surrounding the issue of development? And I want to touch on that for a moment. There are a lot of myths that are used by the development community and those who support development, and they are used to thwart certain advocacy efforts. And a lot is going to be happening in the next 6 months or so. And these myths are important to address because, unfortunately, these myths pit areas against each other. They pit groups against each other in our county. We have a lot of informed advocacy groups in the county, people who are concerned about having less crowded schools, less crowded roads, having environmental and historic preservation, having safe communities with enough infrastructure for healthcare and fire and police resources. And when there's a jurisdiction that has these infrastructure resources in place, then growth, residential development, building construction, increases in population, they can be accommodated by the infrastructure in place. Infrastructure meaning the county provided services like schools, road maintenance, safety issues, all of the county resources that affect all of our quality of life and safety. And when those are adequate or better, then we have population increases. They can be profitable to the budget and they can be accommodated. And when we don't have that underlying infrastructure that exists to accommodate increased population, that's when we run into problems. And we have to then balance all of these various needs and figure out what has to give to make it all work. And then we have people who deeply want to address the affordable housing problem and how what is seen as housing demand that's unmet in the county for modern income people, such as police and teachers, and police and fire service providers. The people who work for our county to give us their services can't afford to live here. That's typically called a moderate income housing issue. And then we have, of course, low income housing concerns about provision of supply there. And with prices going up of our housing being very expensive in Howard County, this is a big legitimate concern. And how do we provide more affordable housing? When people talk about affordable housing, it's usually one or two things. It's either all housing being a little bit cheaper or specific housing being provided to be affordable for moderate and low incomes. So we'll get into that later, those differences. But what happens is that the people who are advocating for a different kind of pacing of development to keep up with our infrastructure needs, sometimes wanting to slow it down to meet infrastructure needs better, wanting to maybe have more payment of impact fees because of what development costs the county when infrastructure is inadequate. Those arguments are made and countered because of this goal of the assumption that a lot more housing will make housing more affordable. So we're seeing that a lot. It's almost always a topic of forums and debates and questionnaires and endorsement areas of political campaigns. You see it very often. It's an extremely important topic. And what's happening soon is called the general plan. Every 10 years, the county redoes by law their general plan. And what that means is that like in the title, it's a general way of organizing and setting forth plans for residential growth, some plans for commercial growth, looking at a very bird's eye view of county land resources and where we see things shifting in market areas and economies, and what is our plan for zoning. And then what happens next, right after the general plan is updated every 10 years, and the current one that's coming soon to be updated is called HOCO by Design, the county's name for the coming soon update of the general plan. And then what will come very soon after that plan is implemented in the next few months, what will come next is called comprehensive rezoning. And that's the implementation of the new plan, meaning all of then the zoning regulations, all of the rules that govern all kinds of land use, what can go where, who can put what on what property, what kind of goals are going to be reached with density in places, what kind of different look and feel we might have in different areas of the county. All of those implementations of that plan they will end up changing hundreds of regulations that guide development and allowances of what you can do with your land in Howard County. And that's called comprehensive rezoning. So those two big things are coming up really soon. They will have lots of hearings. There will be lots of opportunity for input from the community. And so what we thought we would do as sort of a preface to the road we're about to go down preparing for these two big things is to talk about some of the concerns and positions that are being taken and information that is being fed to us about major issues that affect the decision makers in these two big coming events, and sort of warn people what's real, what's not, what to look for, what to focus on, how to advocate correctly for what you want to see happen and not happen. So that's why we're here. And I'm gonna move on fully. Yes, there we go. So one of the big questions that comes into play with development and how to regulate it is whether or not it's profitable. Like I was saying before, if you have adequate infrastructure to accommodate incoming population, development's going to be profitable. I mean, if you can serve the people who are coming, if you have everything in place you need to serve them, then you're going to have new people come in with income taxes, with new building, providing property taxes. You're going to have these things happen. But what's happening with us here in Howard County is we are so far behind in having our infrastructure able to accommodate population that's already here, much less all the planned new influx of new population with the new growth that is being proposed in the new plan, that there's really a big question about whether or not development is going to be adding to the county budget coffers, or whether we're actually going to be going into a lot of debt and to accommodate growth. And one of the things we've seen that makes us truly believe that there's a profitability problem with an enormous amount of growth is that the fiscal impact studies that have been shown to us in this general plan update, HOCO by design, these are some fiscal impact studies done by the county. They're done on a regular basis with regard to budget phases each year, but also within the HOCO by design plan, there have been impact studies that can be seen, and they are overestimating revenues, and that's a problem. But a bigger problem within these studies is that they vastly underestimate the expenses. What happens with development expenses being underestimated, part of the reason is because they put expenses in and they don't put certain ones in that they feel are not applicable to new development when we know they are. And that's part of the problem. And then the other problem is that they just don't put enough in. And we know now, because our infrastructure is inadequate, that more population coming in, development happening, for instance, adding more students to the public school system, that is a cost that has to be captured in a capital budget way of building new school needs and in an operating cost way of servicing more students. And typically they're not including the costs of acquisition of land, the full building of all the schools that are going to be needed by all these students. And there are two reasons why they very much underestimate these expenses. It's because of what they're not including with the land acquisition and all of the capital needs in addition to operating costs, but also because they're assuming a level of student enrollment from development that is vastly underestimated. And I'll get into that with the next slide. But and there's some assumptions in these fiscal impact study expenses, such as, you know, that we're all suddenly going to stop using cars any minute. It's kind of a vast overestimation about how much decrease is going to happen with that. So lots of examples like that. But the school issue is probably one of the biggest expense issues that it is underestimated. So let's just move to that one. There's an ongoing, long-term, constantly repeated myth that resales of homes, resales of existing homes in Howard County cause school overcapacity, i.e. cause much more school student enrollment than new construction. And we've always, advocates have always kind of wondered whether this was true or not. And recently, less than a year ago, this was documented, proven false. And I say that with absolute certainty because I was able to receive from the Howard County Public School System their feasibility study measurements in their student enrollment source information. And what they're saying when they say this number of students are sourced by new construction, and then the rest is by resales, right? They look at what I was able to discover for the first time very recently is they do a snapshot of this year, each year's feasibility study, and then when they're putting that out, it's a snapshot of the last 10 months of occupancy permits in the county. So you're talking brand spanking new development that is 10 months old or less, that has gone up and has a brand new occupant in it that has a new student in the school system. That, and only that, those students are identified as new that year. And then they take the rest of the new students that are known to be new students in that year, and they say the rest are from existing homes, not new construction. And then they take a percentage and they say the people who were the 10-month occupancy folks are this much percentage of the total. And they've been using 42% for a while now as an average for a long time. But what I discovered was the following year, when they say, we're going to take this snapshot again, those people don't roll over from new development. They take the snapshot every year and they don't keep the label on the people going forward. And so you're only ever getting a snapshot of 10-month-old homes that's called new. You don't get 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old. They just drop them off and do a whole new analysis of brand spanking new 10-month-old homes. So if one were going to characterize, we know that 42% of students in the school system have come from 10-month-old homes, that would be an accurate statement. But instead, what they say is 42% of the kids are coming from new construction. That means that 58% are from resales, and therefore development should not pay so much, or so much of a percentage of identifying expenses needed for growth as being responsible for the new kids. And so this is something that is so important. And what's sad is that when things take more than 3 sentences to explain to people, sometimes, you know, it isn't really interesting or sticking with folks. So this is something that I'm spending a few extra moments on because it really is an important situation here, and because it has specifically and directly cost us money. For instance, our impact fees in Howard County were extremely lower, like literally 20 times lower than, say, Montgomery County and every other growing county by leaps and bounds for literally decades. And that's why we're so behind the ball with infrastructure and maintenance needs of the schools and all that, is because our impact fees were so incredibly low. We missed out on a whole lot of money. But this is where we are where we are, and we did finally get 2 years ago, these increase in these fees. And when they were discussing how much, and the council was discussing how much should we raise the fee by, what's fair, they literally took this exact number that was completely outrageously an underestimation of how many kids in the whole system were from new construction, defined as even some rational number of 5-6-year-old house or something, right? And they said 10 months, 42% there, and they took some estimations of what they thought were appropriate increase numbers and reduced them by 58%. So these are not just arguing points. These are not just trying to sound informed with this information and testifying before the council. These are issues that the community needs to understand. When there are myths that abound to this level, they are literally costing our budget and affecting so many things that it's not just about rolling your eyes at an untruth. It seriously needs to be understood. Redistricting can no longer really settle capacity issues anymore. For a long time, the schools in the West were under capacity, and then the schools in the more developed, populated eastern part of the county were over capacity. And so there was this notion that, eventually we can shift things in a domino way or whatever, we can redistrict our way out of this problem. But at this point, when you look at the enrollment projections and when schools are going to be a certain percentage full or not, that's no longer the case even anymore. So we used to have net capacity, even though it was lopsided. Now we don't even have net capacity that is forecasted in the very short term. And so we now don't even have the net capacity, and redistricting cannot get us out of this hole. We've got to figure out how to get the right budgeting and the right pacing of development to make this work. And that is going to lead me to the next topic of then how
Lisa,
do we
before you go to this slide,
sure.
You can stay on this slide, but it sounds like just in one sentence, it sounds like an accounting gimmick a la Enron, like the kind of accounting gimmick that Enron was undertaking that ultimately led to, its downfall. I mean, they don't even have the math right. That's basically what I mean. It's fundamental. It's really fundamental, and it's very troublesome what you just described. So sorry, just wanted to.
Yeah, no, thank you. It is a math provision on a yearly basis that looks accurate with the numbers, but it is being characterized incorrectly, representing something that it actually does not represent, and being used to make policy. And so that's a huge concern. So then how do we pace development? What do we do to solve this problem? And part of what was planned decades ago to keep this problem from happening was the implementation of APFO, which is the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance. It has to do with regulating timing of development, basically, to solve this exact problem with public service provision and how to meet growing population needs. And many jurisdictions across the whole country, many states, many counties and cities, they have an APFO. And we have an APFO here in Howard County. And one of the myths that you'll hear when you hear concerns about strengthening any kind of issues in APFO is that APFO creates a moratorium on growth, and that is bad for our future and our budget. And that's not true. And what a lot of people don't understand the details in APFO is that the longest that they can make a development wait before it can proceed in a school region that is determined to be over capacity and therefore triggering the wait is with that school test, and I'll talk about different tests in APFO, but the school test is the one that makes them wait the longest, and it's about 4 years. I say about because they can take this test when the development reaches a certain point that it's ready. They can then test to see if the schools in the region of the location of the project are over capacity, and the elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools are tested at 3 different levels. High school is 115%. Over capacity means it's over capacity. 110 for middle, 105 for elementary. That was a hard one change from no high schools where it used to be at APFO a long time ago, and now we have these 3 breakdowns. So if any one of those things are present as a measure in your region where your development is, you fail the APFO school test. And you can fail it. If you fail it 3 times, then you pass it the next time. But depending on when you get your first shot, when you're ready, it then comes annually in June after that. I think it's June or July. And so if you could actually test twice in the first year, so to speak. So it's about a 4-year maximum, approximately, that they can hold you up. And once that time has passed, it does not matter how crowded the school regions are around the project, it will proceed. And 2 points to make about this that are really important. One is the Department of Planning and Zoning, which the development projects go through their process and their development plans, and they get approved and they go through a normal expected process with the county. That process takes about 3 years. And so the developers with their projects, they expect this 3-year wait. All of their financing and their plans are completely already with understanding of that wait and planning of that wait. If you look at how much time the school test can halt development, it is a concurrent wait with much of the DPZ process. And therefore, the school test itself is really only halting development a year beyond what they already have to wait anyway. So that's what is maddening about some of this. And, many advocacy efforts have taken place trying to lengthen this wait. There are other tests in APFO. One's called allocations, and that has a lot to do with the general plan that's coming up. You're only allowed to have a certain amount of units that can exist as new each year, and different units can go into different regions of the county. And there have not been allocation weights in the county. So we know that those allocations exist high enough that they have not in reality made projects wait in the past. But that is there, just to be clear. And then the third test after schools is a roads test that doesn't hold parcels up, but it does do some traffic tests and possibly require some road remediation work monetarily. So that's a different thing. So why are we seeing that the county will not lengthen the wait when in reality it's only a year past the normal wait and only 4 years max? Why is that? The reason is because there's another myth going on right now, and that is that the Office of Law in Howard County has advised the county executive and county council that, and they've been doing this for like 10 years now. So it's not just the current Office of Law, this has been the attitude and the summary advice from the Office of Law for at least a decade. I've been doing this work. And their notion is that if you make a parcel, if you make a project, a homeowner with their property rights wait more than 4 years to do what they want to do with their property, that's taking their property rights. And a taking as a legal term is an illegal thing for a government to do to a private property owner. Now, what does that really mean? Well, The Supreme Court of the United States in 2017 had a case that went all the way up, a zoning case that went all the way up to the Supreme Court in 2017. And it completely counters this argument. It's called Wisconsin versus Muir. When I brought it to the attention of the council in 2018, they said it had nothing to do with Howard County, that the specifics of this case were irrelevant and didn't apply to us. And they're right. But what they missed pointing out and understanding was that it doesn't matter what the case's details were. The court used a measurement when looking at those details, which do not matter what they are. The measurement they used to say whether or not those details rose to a level of a taking or not was that, and I have it quoted here on the screen, a regulation which denies all economically beneficial or productive use of the land will require compensation under the takings clause. That is a taking of property rights. If a government holds up your land, takes your land, does whatever the various things under their control to or affecting your land, if they take away all economic benefit, that's a taking. Well, the problem is in Howard County for at least 10 years now, we are defining a taking as taking maximum profit away from a project, not leaving it with no value. And so they have created this misnomer taking to, and what does this have to do with our concerns here? What it has to do with is that they won't extend the wait in ABFO past this arbitrary notion of 4 years being the maximum that we can possibly do, and they're already waiting 3 with their process. And it just doesn't fail the rationality test, because even without this takings knowledge that is, I think, very important, there are other jurisdictions that have waits as long as 7 years, and they're in our state, and these are so they haven't had lawsuits, or there haven't been any lawsuits won for all these other jurisdictions that have longer APFO than us. So I think that we're being overly risk averse and not really looking at this Muir case appropriately. So a lot of people ask me, well, why is it 4 years? And I just wanted to kind of put this out there to answer that question. This is why we're in this boat of we can't extend the wait in APFO. Now, why is there so much pressure?
Hey, Lisa, really quickly. So I think I know you've made it clear in the discussion, but I feel like it's worth reiterating here that these are government policies, government laws that, the basis for government laws are the things that you're presenting so far. And one of the most glaring is, of course, the takings idea that it has not been challenged by sitting elected officials and those who help them, like the county solicitor, for example, that they have not rejected this notion, and knowing you've presented a very rational explanation that preventing maximum profits does not mean taking. That argument is a sound argument, and I think anybody can understand that, but that has not been challenged, and I just feel like it's worth emphasizing that these are government laws, and so it's just really troubling to me that this is that's what's governing us, basically.
Sure, and it's affecting policy. And an ironic example with regard to takings is that if you're supposed to be using the measurement of leaving no economic value, a lot of times the plans that where a developer will come to the council and ask for like a zoning change, so to speak, or they'll ask for things kind of in advance sometimes before they even own the property on which they want to develop. It's like they're testing the water to see how much profit they can possibly get before they enter into a project and buy land and get loans and do all of that due diligence with their financial plans. They sometimes will actually seek to change something about the property, like get waivers from rules, get new zoning allowances that aren't on the land currently changed, and they'll go through that whole process before they even own it. And it happens more often than you would imagine. And so how can we be taking your economic value, especially when you don't even own the property yet? So yeah, it gets pretty hairy. Hairy. So at the end of that point, I was saying that, well, why? What is the pressure to have these things seem so obvious, just ignored? And it's because it's not just developers who are doing their jobs and trying to maximize their profits and making their plans, and therefore their own lobbyists and attorneys and representatives are making their claims and their beliefs about how they want things to be analyzed. It's not just them. It's like, who else is out there who are making these arguments, and why? Why are they doing this? And the reason is because there is this notion that if we just build and build and build and build more and more and more homes, as many homes as possible, increase the supply of market housing, all housing, any housing, not just affordable housing, but if we just glut the market with an enormous amount of supply across market levels, even that housing prices will come down. And there is this characterization that density equals affordable housing, that maximum increases and allowances in zoning of, having construction projects be allowed to do as many units as possible that could possibly go somewhere, give them as many as they can, change zoning laws to create as much residential unit construction as possible, is going to supposedly create affordable housing for everyone. Now, what I said earlier about two different kinds of affordable housing, because people throw that phrase affordable housing around, so what does it actually mean? It means two different things. Well, three different things, really. There's moderate income housing, which is 80% of the median income. That's called moderate income. And typically we want to see a piece of every project, and by law, percentages of every project have to have these MIHUs, moderate income housing units. And they try to get out of them, and they pay to get out of them, or they push them somewhere else. And that's why they're concentrated in certain areas, because let's face it, if you have to pay a fee or provide the unit, where are you going to pay that fee? You're going to pay that fee where the project has the higher market values. So you're not going to see them available there, because the differential of paying the fee and providing the unit is higher. And so you're not going to see those units provided in more expensive areas. And so they get concentrated because these fees are paid. And it's really rare for a situation to occur where eliminating or increasing something will give you your goal. If we didn't have fee in lieu, then these moderate income housing units would be supplied across the county, right? They can't pay to get out of them. But that fee fund actually does help a lot of low income projects and homeless people and vouchers and programs that are commendable. It also goes a lot to private developers. It's a pain, but, and that's a whole nother topic, but that fund does help lower income and homeless people and people who need rent assistance, and it does do a lot of good. And so I realized a while back that eliminating the fee was not the answer, and the answer is raising the fee to get it spread out more. And yeah, let's face it, they're not going anywhere. These projects are being done, they're very profitable. Raising the fee is not going to stop them, and that's also thwarted. And why? Why is that thwarted too? Why is everything thwarted? Because there's this notion that we have to just keep providing this extra supply to get affordable housing. Well, we know that having more supply is not going to get us more moderate income housing where we need it. It's not going to get us low income housing where we need it, because the brand new housing that's going up, it's not suddenly costing appreciably less to house. Like the lower income or even moderate income person is not suddenly going to be able to afford a house they couldn't afford before if there's a whole lot more supply. So really what affordable they mean, even though they aren't acting like they mean this, they're acting like they mean people can afford things where they couldn't before. But what really happens is they're just making an economic notion about increasing supply means all the prices will go down. All the prices will just go down a little teeny bit, because let's face it, there's a lot of things that affect home prices in the market. You know, the interest rate, the demand curve for housing, which our demand is so high that moving supply isn't going to make appreciable decreases in price because our demand is still really high. You know, remember that thing? And so there's the whole trickle down issue with this that is kind of maddening, because you actually see a lot of progressive people talking about this theory as if it's wonderful, and they would be the first ones to be furious to be called trickle down economics folks, because it doesn't work. You know, like the little graph there shows this is how it's supposed to work, but here's how it really works. You just inundate with the supply of housing, but guess what? It's not cheaper. It's not going to be cheaper. So the county is also responsible to not just actually meet all demand, right? I mean, what if 800,000 people wanted to live here? Guess what? They can't. You can't. There is some limit with providing appropriate, safe, and quality of life services to the people who are here and the people who are coming. And one of the answers that I think to this problem is housing trusts. I've been talking to a lot of people in other jurisdictions about how do they handle affordable housing with all of these known problems with it, funding problems with it. And the answer I'm getting is that they do housing trusts, and so the government will take over blighted property or their land bank, and they'll make trusts. We do some preservation trusts here with regard to the environmental issues and parks and things, but we hadn't until very recently talked about doing housing trust budgeting for affordable housing. And a while back, Dr. Ball, as county executive, had proposed to start a housing trust fund. And at first I was really excited, thinking, oh, we're finally going to do this. This is the answer to actually get affordable housing across the county for real, and not just inundate supply and help developers, but actually help people where you need to help people. And for folks who don't like tax money to go to such a thing, I say to them, it is a lot cheaper than inundating our infrastructure and paying for that. So there's that. But then it didn't pass at first in the budget, that $5 million housing trust fund, that fund didn't at first clear a little over a year ago, because it didn't have guardrails around it to earn its name trust, that it wasn't just going to go to private projects and say, oh, if you do this much more affordable, you're going to get all this money. And it's like, well, that's not the real goal. And so it didn't pass. And then there was a lot of backlash that because the label sounds so great, that the council then ended up, okay, we're going to go ahead and pass this now. So recently it was passed, and it's about to be rolled out. And I'm just very hopeful that as this commendable sounding thing is rolled out, that we talk about public projects with this money. Because if this money, just goes millions to private projects to have a little bit more affordable than is legally required, that's just going to be an enormous overpayment of what the county could be providing for much less. So I'm going to be keeping a close eye on this plan. Before I move on, Any questions, or you want to talk about anything with this so far?
Well, yeah, I think you you touched on some really good points here, and probably the most important point, at least for me, is actually 2 points. First is this ridiculous trickle down notion that a lot of I'm going to get a little political here, but a lot of establishment Democrats or corporate Democrats push is developed by an institute that is founded by the Koch brothers. And actually, a lot of this supply is the answer to reducing home prices is developed by this institute called Markovitz Institute. And I just learned about it this year, and it's pretty shocking that a lot of corporate Democrats are pushing this notion, and in Howard County, it's that many have latched on to that. And I think the second thing is what you mentioned with you can't, if we're trying to address the issue of actually addressing reducing home prices, it needs to be done through regulation, because I think the median home price is like $500,000. We're talking about people needing to, people who don't have the ability to get to purchase homes that are maybe $300,000, $250,000. That's still a lot of money to be able to purchase a home. And we there's no realistically, you can't reduce home prices by even $50,000 by through the solution that's being provided here, and only benefits the developer. So I thought those were really important points.
Right. And the only way you're really going to get somebody to be able to afford significantly lower than market price in rent or in home ownership, it is through certain government programs. And as far as the home ownership goes, the housing trust that the Charm City folks talked to me about a while back in Baltimore was they actually had a hybrid program where the county owned the land, the city owned the land, and the homeowner owned the home. And so what was great about that theory, that process, was that you could get wealth building with the home increase in value, but the government never lost control of keeping it an affordable unit. Because another issue of what we're doing now to provide affordable units, they're not permanent. And so we just keep digging our holes. And it's great to build wealth and have those people have that, but we need a hybrid system so that it's not so expensive to keep making this help continue. So another myth you hear about APFO, and I have personally seen this in hearings time and time again, where someone will come in to talk to the council about why they have to not strengthen APFO and how they have to make APFO less, not more restrictive. Because Harry homeowner, it just wants to put a renovation on his house. He just wants to put his, poor grandmother in the backyard or whatever, right? It's like some little thing it's just adding one unit on my homestead here, and you're going to make me wait years, and it's not fair. And every time I hear this, I go up there and I say, you do realize this doesn't apply to you because there is a big fat exemption for it. If you have only one residential unit you're adding, you don't have to wait. So just kind of wanted to throw that one out there. And just kind of one last thing I'm hearing with all of the changes that are about to happen with the general plan update, with the zoning regulation changes that'll be coming after that. You're hearing a lot about what Montgomery County is doing lately and how there's been some changes there, because politically there have been some new people who are typically a little bit more fans of more residential development. And so they're looking at less restriction on development, reducing their impact fees. They are wanting to attack that way, like we've described, to increase their housing supply. There's several reasons why HOCO is not MOCO. And one of the biggest reasons is that for decades, Montgomery County had 20 times the rate of impact fees for development projects than we did. The millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars that they got over that time period that we didn't. Of course, they can do things a little differently than us. Also, their school system is extraordinarily different than ours. Their growth in population and students are, we have a much smaller system. What works for them is not necessarily going to work for us. And so we have to be really careful about saying we need to be like someone else just because they happen to be easing restrictions because of this missing middle housing, which is just the moderate income housing, which we could easily eradicate the lack of supply of missing middle housing by increasing the fee in lieu of providing it. So there's that. And then, like I said, having the low income projects funded and assisted with these housing trust ideas in a hybrid fashion, we would end up being able to spend less money and providing more units if we went about this way. But it's very hard to get that notion through. So what can people do to try to better and more productively and more efficiently fiscally find solutions to these problems? And like I said, these things are coming up. They're going to be publicized. You could go to hocobydesign.com and see the current plans of what the proposals are that are going to go to the council pretty soon, and see if you like them or not. You can email the council. The email address that's on the screen goes to all the council members. And there are civic groups out there who are working on all this. If you want to stay informed, you can join any number of them. And we are all going to try to keep people informed on our Facebook pages and with these kinds of talks, publicizing them so that people know and are very clear about when these hearings are going to be taking place. Comprehensive rezoning is a big deal in Howard County. The last time we had comprehensive rezoning, I chaired a referendum to stop some of the egregious changes that a lot of people felt across the county were being passed in a bill that made almost 500 changes at once. That includes regulation changes, not just parcel map allowance changes. But it took 10 of those we took to referendum, and it was a very long, crazy process. And we don't want to see that happen again. It's sort of a cautionary tale that we need to handle it this time much more methodically, more than one bill, longer series of hearings, more focused in maybe regional areas. And, just hope that they do a better job at what they're going to allow and not allow, and how they're going to be responsible with the quality of life issues and our tax money. So thank you, Hari.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. As you mentioned, your experience with the referendum, and hopefully we'll get more details on that. We talked about, you probably potentially make another video describing that experience. So
yeah.
Can't
believe it's coming up on the 10-year mark. I definitely need to tell people what happened then, who
Yeah,
maybe don't know or haven't been here that long.
yeah, no, that would be good to hear. So we have reached the hour mark. This this has been really helpful. I think getting getting this out there before the general plan, after and before the comprehensive zoning, I think will be useful. And just it's really anybody who is interested in who starts paying attention to zoning and land use and wants to learn more, I think they'll find it very useful. So I really appreciate the time that you took to prepare the presentation in an understandable, relatable way. So I'm sure we'll all find it very useful. So thanks, Lisa, and